Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Krishna Krishna. We have gathered here at this beautiful 22 or so acres in Southern California to celebrate the establishment of a first in ISKCON in this part of the world, on this side of the world. A small farm project that has the support of more than one temple, city temple. This is very monumental. I'd like to talk about that just so we can appreciate the impact of what you all are doing and what is the product of good leadership. First of all, let us consider Sri Vrindavan Dham. We're singing Jai Radha Madhava, the song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. What is that song actually doing? It's giving us a perfect picture of the spiritual world, a perfect picture of the pinnacle of the spiritual world. And what is there at the top of the spiritual world? A remote agricultural village known as Vrindavan, where Krishna, Govinda, Gopal, herds cows during the day and has pleasure pastimes at night. When we're offering our food to convert it to prasad, we recite Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Hitaya. Krishna is the protector of the cows and the brahmanas. Krishna is firmly dedicated to Brahmana culture and cow culture. Interestingly, in one purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada states that, yes, Krishna is the champion of the cows and the brahmanas, both of them. But actually, of the two, he likes the cows more than the brahmanas. So, here we are at Escondido, and you might be wondering, well, okay, it's a beautiful place, it's very nice to be here, nice weather. What is the transcendental sociological impact of what's going on here? Small steps toward a goal. I was discussing with His Grace Tukaram Prabhu a history that many of us know. In the 70s, Srila Prabhupada unleashed upon the world plans for devotee farms, Vaishnava farms. And his idea was, first of all, that devotees could live simply. He was concerned that the Vaishnava lifestyles in the city weren't really conducive for spiritual life due to the stress and strain. He understood that the urban lifestyles were going to take a toll on his disciples. And also, he had the vision that the temples in the city would get milk from farms outside the city. In other words, it's quite clear that Srila Prabhupada never intended that we be, for decades at a time, dependent on store-bought milk. So, in the 70s, devotees were in their youthful immaturity, but still sincerity. They tried to carry out Srila Prabhupada's desires in our own faulty way. It's been said that the main qualification of Srila Prabhupada's disciples back in the 70s was that they tried to do what he said. That is not a small thing. He said farm, so they got into farms. But we didn't have the maturity to pull off a successful farm project back then. Prabhupada was so far ahead of his time. His Grace Tukaram Prabhu and I were discussing how if we had had the maturity to carry out Prabhupada's perfect instructions, we would have been sitting at the cutting edge of what alternative thinkers are thinking society should be now. But we were young, we were inexperienced. Nevertheless, it is not too late to act on Srila Prabhupada's instructions, to protect cows, to demonstrate a simple lifestyle. We may be surprised how quickly the world changes. I'll give an example. I spent many years underground in former communist Europe. And Prabhupada said that if his books are distributed, communism is finished. Now, we took that into our hearts spiritually, but we never expected to see the communist empire fall apart. And from the material point of view, no one expected that. Even the CIA is on record for saying they were caught totally off guard when the communist empire unraveled. And the CIA is supposed to know everything. But this one, they didn't know. Who could expect that such an extraordinary preaching field would open up? Who could expect such major changes that would allow Krishna consciousness to be more openly propagated? My point in saying that is, we may think, well, who is ever going to farm in the USA these days? Everything is cyber, everything is silicon chips, everything is solid state this, solid state that, IT. But we might be shocked at what the future may bring. You look at the world headlines, what do you see? In Spain, a first world country, big tourist destination in Europe. It's known as sunny Spain. That's where all the British, the Germans, and so on go for their holiday breaks. So in Spain now there's 50% youth unemployment. And what's happening is that people are becoming so desperate, they are crowding around dumpsters outside supermarkets and scrounging for food. And it's become such a problem that in some places in Spain, the government's ordering the dumpsters to be locked because they don't want to create a tourist embarrassment. Tourists are going there for a holiday and they see people surrounding dumpsters and vying for the opportunity to dive into the dumpsters to get scraps of food. Also at the fruit and vegetable depots, people wait at the truck bays for when the fruit and veggie truck pulls out. They know something's going to fall off the truck. And so they just, as soon as the truck pulls out, they just dive onto whatever tomatoes, potatoes have happened to have fallen on the ground. So this is a first world country. Who could have ever predicted that to happen? And then, of course, Greece is even more of a basket case. What's happening in Greece now? It was traditionally an agricultural country. And now, of course, everything is urbanized. But the young people are going back to farming now. Why? Because they love the land, because they have idealism about simple living, high thinking, because they're environmentally conscious. No. Why are the young people in Greece going back to the land?
They're hungry?
Because there's no other choice. There are some agricultural schools set up by Christians many decades ago, American Christians, to train people how to farm. And now those schools are oversubscribed because the young people realize we have no hope for a job, and Their families generally have ancestral lands in the countryside which have been abandoned as the young people flock to the cities. But now the young people want to go back, and they don't have the skills. They don't know how to farm, but they have no other option. So they have their waiting lists to go to these agricultural training schools to learn how to grow vegetables, fruits, grains, and other things, of course, abominable things we do not deal with. So, my point in telling you this is so you can see how quickly the world changes. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security. So Prabhupada had that vision far ahead of his time. And it's a testimony to his transcendental status. How the reality is, if we had been able to follow those instructions perfectly, we'd be sitting on the cutting edge. For example, I like to give this example. The first devotee who went to New Zealand to establish the Hare Krishna movement. I guess generally people think of New Zealand by what they see in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all the movies. It's a tourist paradise, but actually its number one source of income is agriculture, dairy particularly. So Prabhupada told this devotee, Tushta Krishna, he told him in Mumbai, that place is a first-class agricultural country. Its milk products are famous all over the world. Just see how practical, transcendently practical Prabhupada is. When you go there, do not get a temple in the city. Get a farm and start Varnashram Dharma. So the devotee, he left Mumbai with that instruction in his mind, but by the time he got to New Zealand, he realized we're Hare Krishnas. We always have temples in the city. In other words, the devotees weren't as forward as Prabhupada was. If, for example, in New Zealand, they had gotten farmland when Prabhupada told them to, they would have easily afforded a huge chunk of land. Now it is impossible. Land costs millions upon millions of dollars because you have both a tourist capital and you have an agricultural capital. So the Chinese are trying to gobble everything up, and the government's trying to keep them out while under the table allowing them in. So all these kind of maneuvers are going on. Now, if devotees want to get a farm, certainly they'll have to rely upon divine dispensation, because just a farm of 300 acres, 350 acres the size of Girinagri, oh, you're talking about $4 or $5 million minimum. So we weren't smart enough to carry out Prabhupada's desires in a way that we'd now be wonderfully situated. But it's never too late. Sometimes it takes decades to try to fulfill the mission of the spiritual master. Sometimes it takes a lifetime in preparation. So many of Prabhupada's disciples have become veterans, and even grand disciples of Prabhupada, they're now veterans in carrying on the ISKCON mission. So we're able now to offer that veteran experience to potential donors and supporters. All right, we didn't do it 40 years ago, but now we have the experience we didn't have 40 years ago. You have the economic support, we have now the experience. Back then, we had the money, but we had no experience. So, in this way, the present situation can be a plus, because what price can you put on experience? What price can you put on maturity? Generally throughout the world, our farm projects, ISKCON's farm projects, have been solo ventures, a farm out in the middle of nowhere, valiantly trying to show cow protection and agriculture, even some movements toward self-sufficiency. And it's a hard struggle. The general consensus amongst leaders who have experience in farm projects is that an isolated farm on its own is a recipe for failure. because the resources, the enthusiasm, the manpower comes from the city. What we have here now is a joint project by city temples, and this is so impactful for our whole ISKCON society. City temples are seeing it advantageous to be involved with cow protection, to get their produce, their fruits and vegetables from their own agricultural operation. And then, certainly looks like a nice place to have weekend gatherings, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's not far from Los Angeles. It's not far from Laguna Beach. It's not far from San Diego. Who can deny it? It's kind of nice being out here. You can just visualize various buildings for devotee gatherings, for retreats, for outreach. It looks all attainable. I was speaking with His Grace Goverdhana Prabhu, how originally this land was acquired for a temple. You still see the sign up front there. It's an example, he was pointing out, of what we were speaking about yesterday at our program. How a devotee sincerely does his best in endeavoring to please Krishna according to a certain plan. And then Krishna can take that sincere plan and just flip it over and make of it what he likes. So Goverdhana Prabhu was reminding me of an anecdote I told last night about how Prabhupada was describing his coming to the West. All his life, from when he got the order from his Guru Maharaj when he was in his early 20s, he was always meditating on carrying out the order of his spiritual master to spread bhakti throughout the world, particularly in the English-speaking countries. He never forgot that. He was always planning how to do it. So he revealed once that his strategy was to become very rich because he thought no one would listen to a poor Indian. Back in the 60s and 70s, India was famous as the starving country, where you had to donate money to charity because everyone in the whole country was starving. That was the universal opinion. I remember in America in the 70s, India, that starving place. I remember as a little boy, my mother would always tell me, make sure you finish everything on your plate. Remember the starving people in China and India. Now what does my mother say? Oh, Indians, those smart people who take all the jobs. Things have changed. So, Prabhupada's idea in the 60s and 50s, right at the time he was about to come to the West, said, I want to be a rich man, and then people will listen. Americans will respect someone who's rich and who says, follow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, that was my plan. But Krishna and I had an argument. Krishna said, do it as a poor man. I said, no, do it as a rich man. He said, and Krishna won. So I came penniless. So similarly, we can see that so much endeavor, transcendental endeavor of sincere devotees was put into acquiring this land. And they had a particular vision in mind. And then everything's changed. And another vision developed. And because the devotees involved are part and parcel of Krishna, they recognize that we are subordinate to Krishna's vision. And so now, amazingly, already within a few short years, 1 or 2 years, you have a productive small farm project. How was that? Laguna Beach Temple, San Diego Temple, I think even Los Angeles, with its huge requirements of boga, they're getting produce from here. And their plans how to supply all the milk products that temples need just from this small plot of land, 22, 24 so acres. But it's very important to start somewhere. In the 60s and 70s, when Prabhupada's disciples were all young devotees, and basically, I like to say, back in those days, there was only one adult in the Hare Krishna movement, was Srila Prabhupada, for the most part. So we always wanted to start off with something huge, which at that time, obviously, we couldn't manage. Nevertheless, Prabhupada went with our enthusiasm. He would go to New Vrindavan and encourage them in their agricultural endeavors, even though New Vrindavan is obviously not the most ideal place for growing food. And then when devotees acquired Gita Nagari, he would go there, and he was very impressed by the productive potential of Gita Nagari. So he would encourage. But again, leaders were young, and especially upon the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada, obviously there was going to be some shake-ups, some crises, because an extraordinary soul from the spiritual world like that just doesn't leave our presence and there's no repercussions. It's part of personalism to expect that when a great soul from the spiritual world departs, then you're going to see some tremors. That's just the way it is. So now we're seeing a small step towards the great goal. And no doubt, when potential donors and supporters see a small step being executed so wonderfully, they'll have the faith and confidence to want to carry out Srila Prabhupada's instructions in a bigger way. So this small to medium-sized step is so important. It's more than a foothold. It's already functioning, it's already producing. Enthusiastic devotees who are staffing this place, who are dedicated. So it's making a statement. This place doesn't have a name yet. I'm sure it will in a few months. But whatever you're going to call this place, it's making a statement that indeed it's possible. And this is a very important statement. It is possible to use your brain and come up with a solution to buying slaughterhouse milk. It's not impossible, and it's not just, well, it's Kali Yuga, what can be done? Just do the best you can, It is possible to get milk from protected cows. It is possible to grow food and supply our city centers, just as Prabhupada wanted. It just takes some intelligence, which is there in our leadership now. Now we don't simply have youthful intelligence, we have wizened, mature intelligence. Intelligence in the golden years of life. It's always a good way of saying we're getting old, the golden years. I can remember myself, when I think back now, I'm just shocked. I was 27 years old when I went behind the Iron Curtain. 27 years old. So that was our only good qualification, that we did what Prabhupada asked. We tried our best to do even things that looked impossible. Now, as we are older, as the leadership is older, not simply the Prabhupada disciples, but also his grand disciples, they're older. They have that maturity and dependability. And you see this project a product of that maturity and dependability. So this is something to tell the whole ISKCON world about. A small farm project that's not just a piece of land waiting for the future social collapse. Often, throughout the world, I travel on every continent, so I get to hear everything. This is the rationale. Well, we're not doing anything on this farmland we have. We haven't done anything on it for 20 years, but it's there when society collapses. There's truth to that, but what you are demonstrating here is the non-doomsday approach to Hare Krishna farm projects. It is very important. You're showing that even in California, although the affluence of California has taken a hit, since 2008, but according to current news reports, things are slowly on the way up. Any case, whether that's true or not, compared to the rest of the world, still California is prosperous, and you're showing how to have a viable farm operation, even in a situation when things aren't quite like Spain or Greece. And of course, we all know that'll never happen. So, whether it does or not, a Vaishnav is the greatest opportunist. We take advantage of every situation for Krishna's service, for Krishna's pleasure. Just like a definition Prabhupada gave of an expert business person. He said an expert business person does not make a profit only when the price is going up. If you're truly a business person, you make a profit whether the price goes up or down. So similarly, he said, a devotee knows how to serve Krishna in any circumstance, so-called favorable, so-called unfavorable. So whether you're operating in circumstances like Spain and Greece now, or you're operating in circumstances of relative affluence, still you think how to make a profit for Krishna in terms of Krishna's pleasure. This is our calling, and this is our managemental principle. Another managemental principle Prabhupada gave is very interesting. He said, to create an interest in Krishna where there is no interest, that is management. So this 22 or so acres of land has the potential to reach out to persons and interest them in the bhakti lifestyle. It's a beautiful place, it's scenic, it's quiet, it's near the chakras of San Diego, Laguna Beach, and Los Angeles. This could be a place to cultivate newcomers to bhakti, as well as cultivate the fruits and veggies. It can also cultivate jivatmas. So I see a great future for this place, and it is so enlivening to see that cow protection is taken so seriously. It's not just an ornament that may be there on the Hare Krishna movement or not. It is so important for our bhakti because Krishna loves the cows more than the brahmanas. When you go to the spiritual world, unless you plan to go to Vaikuntha, if you plan to go to Goloka Vrindavan, you better get used to cows. Otherwise, Lakshmi Narayan, fair enough, they're waiting for you. Remember, in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srivas Thakur jousting verbally with Srup Damodar about the opulence of Vaikuntha versus the simplicity of Vrindavan. So, Srivas Thakur in the Panchatattva, he's actually Narada Muni. So he began speaking in the mood of Narada Muni. Lord Chaitanya pointed it out. Srivas, you've got Narada Swabhava. You've got the nature of Narada Muni. Therefore, you're talking like this. You're bragging about Vaikuntha. Because Srivas Thakur was saying, just see the opulence of my Lakshmi Devi. Look at the throne of jewels she sits on. Look at the grandeur. Look at the extraordinary display of riches. This is the real thing. And then Srivas said, but when you talk about Vrindavan, what's in Vrindavan? Clumps of grass, peacock feathers on the ground, forest minerals, milk boiling. That's Vrindavan. How can it compare to Vaikuntha? So Lord Chaitanya had to calm Srivas down. Look. You're Narada Muni. You're a Vaikuntha man. Don't you know Srup Damodar is a pure devotee of Vrindavan. He's not going to be swayed by the grandeur of your presentation. Then Srup Damodar, he responded to the challenge. Well, don't you know? In Vrindavan, every step is dance. Every word is song. The ground, the soil is Chintamani, touchstone. The trees are all desire trees. He went on and on about the so-called simple, plain opulence of Vrindavan. Presenting it in Vrindavan, we're going to embark upon a campaign of blaspheming slaughterhouse milk. So I can say now, he told me, well, you go first. You can get away with it, you know. You go first. So we, in some of our centers in New Zealand, we started that. We just said, hey, look, we just raised such a commotion. And it was a little controversial at the time. Some devotees were saying, oh, Prabhupada didn't mind slaughterhouse milk. Why are you making such a commotion about this? Or, even though the cow is killed, the cow gets benefit when the milk is offered to Krishna. It's like saying, well, someone donated money to the temple. They're killed, but they get benefit because they donated the money. Well, you say, well, it's nice they donated the money, and certainly you're going to get benefit, but we'd like the person to be alive. But when it comes to the cow, well, it's all right, the cow is dead. The cow gets benefit from the milk offered to Krishna. We don't want to have to rest our case on such shaky ground. And it's very indefensible when making public preaching. I've had situations in which I realize we don't have a leg to stand on when we're talking to persons who are tuned in to the horrors of cow slaughter. Mangalarti Mataji from Toronto can tell you programs I've done in Toronto, and persons would just get on my case. How can you make such a presentation about animal welfare and not eating meat and treating all living entities equally, and at the same time you drink milk from slaughterhouse cows? And what could I say? You tell me, what would my defense be? Should I say, well, the cows get benefit, you see, even though they're killed? How does that sound in public? So I just was stuttering around, and after that I realized, okay, this is not going to work. This ideology of our unnecessary and addictive reliance on slaughterhouse milk has corroded our thinking and made us publicly look foolish. We're not living according to our principles. So what we did at some centers in New Zealand, we just totally criticized the use of slaughterhouse milk, and devotees en masse just stopped using it, and we didn't have any alternative. So after a couple of years of the marketplace for slaughterhouse milk being totally dry, what happened? A few Vaishya-like devotees started looking around. Devotees aren't drinking milk, but they want milk, but they don't want slaughterhouse milk. If we just get some land and keep some cows, we got a good business going. So because the market was dried up, the Vaishyas, they see opportunity, and so that's what happened. So some devotees got some land and started keeping cows and supplying milk to the centers. They had a captive market. And then, once that happened, one of the temples saw, hey, this looks embarrassing. This is something the temple should be doing, especially if the temple has 100 acres. We should be doing that. So then the temple took over the operation and facilitated the devotees. So unless you take a stand somewhere, nothing's going to happen. This is how the Hare Krishnas work, Letting you know, this is how the Hare Krishnas work. You have to take a stand somewhere, and that's what I see this place is doing. I hope soon I'll be able to call the name. Won't have to say this place. So it's making a major impact already. You're able to provide an example for worldwide ISKCON. And you can rightfully feel good about yourselves that your milk is coming from a legitimate source. You're not perpetuating a horror. a horror that more and more people are becoming aware of, and they don't want anything to do with it. What you have happening now in North America is that generally people are not considering becoming a vegetarian. They're going all the way to veganism because they can't stomach how cows are treated. We're not vegans. We want milk from protected cows. But where do we get that from? How are we using our intelligence to create such a situation where devotees can actually participate in thoughtful discussions about the future of human society without our feeling embarrassed that we're not walking our talk? Srila Prabhupada was so futuristic in trying to set up the Hare Krishna movement in all ways to have an impact, not just during his physical presence, but also for centuries after. This is Vaikuntha intelligence. This is not ordinary intelligence. And we can look back and see all the strategic initiatives of Srila Prabhupada, how so far ahead of the time they were. Just like, for example, another case, his desire to have scientific preaching. Anti-evolution, anti-life comes from matter. Now you have institutes who are totally dedicated to that and churning out literature, churning out movies. They've basically taken, it looks like, they've taken Srila Prabhupada's game plan from the 70s and just applied it and are endeavoring in that way. Similarly, others have taken a page out of Srila Prabhupada's book about trying to set up farm communities. We have so much in our heritage, so many jewels to mine. How to make progressive steps towards achieving these goals. Maybe we don't do the huge step all at once, but certainly small steps are so noteworthy, and we can see that here. Who can say what this project will lead to as more and more persons see it can be done and they get on board? And the most noteworthy thing is the cooperation, the zonal cooperation. This will send a message throughout the ISKCON world. You can look at Hungary, for example, and you could say, well, they have the cooperation there because Hungary is about the size of Connecticut, and there's a language barrier, and there's a predominant spiritual master there. It's not true that everyone in Hungary is Shivaram Maharaj's disciples. It just happens that everyone cooperates. I know that's very exotic. There's about 5 spiritual masters who have disciples in Hungary, but it doesn't look like that because the gurus work together with the management, and disciples cooperate regardless of who their spiritual master is. But anyway, sometimes they say, well, that's just a special case. It's a postage stamp size country, and therefore the GBC can enforce cooperation between the city temples and the farm. But here, how are they going to say that in Southern California? You know, California, everyone, you do your own thing, Yet we have such a cohesive, insightful management that's able to pull off cooperation like this. So that's what astounds me. That temples are able to see a way to work together. And therefore, I know this place is going to be a success. So I'm very thankful to be here at this. I find it to be a glorious occasion, and certainly it's just the beginning. And we don't know what the future economic status of the USA will be. Maybe it will continue as it is, the jobless recovery, or maybe things will go down, maybe things will go up, who can say? But devotees are the best opportunists. We want to position ourselves so that whatever the future may be, we'll be able to give pleasure to the parampara and to Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.